speak to all of you guys. I am not a management graduate, so definitely you are more qualified people than me. But then again, from an experience standpoint, I would love to dissipate whatever little information I have in my life across to you in terms of product management, first principle thinking. I'll quickly share my screen and you guys just tell me that whether you are able to see across the PPT that I have.
Yes, we can see
Give me a
it.
second. I'll just quickly share across. Yeah. So guys, let's keep the agenda like this. I'll try to go through. I'll stop in between for like every 2-3 odd slides. And then I would quickly ask any of you guys, let's keep a very interactive session, keep a very pertinent question. If you have, raise your hand and typically ask the question. I will try to answer that. But in the next 40 odd minutes, I'll try to finish the presentation, and the last 20 minutes would be open to questions related to anything related to the presentation or specifically related to product management in general. That's okay. Yeah. So yeah, so the topic is, I have not kept a general product management topic, like generally what is product management and what do you do there. I have specifically chosen an ecosystem which is very close to my heart, that is EdTech and the future of learning for the K-12 ecosystem. The intro is already given by Dhanushree, so I'll just quickly move on to the next slide. Yeah. So in order to think about any product problem, first of all, what do you think about? The first thing that you think about is that how big is the problem? How big it is. Am I really solving it for a large set of users and they face that problem that is fundamentally very close to their heart? Like, let me give you a very simple example. Buying milk. It's a problem that you might have, somebody else might have, or a third person might have, right? But it's a problem that can be solved through a dukan also. You can go to a dukan and purchase milk from there, right? You're not solving it for hundreds of millions of people. But the moment you try to move it to a scale where it reaches to hundreds and millions of people, then it becomes a scalable problem. And that's where a company like Milk Basket comes in. And it typically solves that problem for you. So similar to that, EdTech is something that has been rapidly growing. Education as a global industry is a $7 trillion industry. $7 trillion industry means 3 times the GDP of India. 3 times the GDP of India, right? And specifically in education, there are 4 major verticals. The first vertical is pre-K. What I mean by pre-K is till first class, to put it in Indian words. First class, pre-K. Then you have K-12, first to 12th grade, which is typically second grade, third grade, fourth grade. And in France, you call it baccalaureate. In other places, in London, you call it A+. Then you have post-secondary, which you and me guys have done. I have done a BTech, you are at IIM graduates. So you are doing post-secondary. And the fourth part is the workforce, the skill set part, that you want to build something in product management, in data science, in probably in artificial intelligence, and all of those points, right? Now, education as an industry is a $7 trillion industry, but EdTech is just 5% of it. Now you would say, why should we focus on EdTech then? Then if it's a $7 trillion industry, what's the point, right? So the point is that it is the fastest growing segment of the education ecosystem. Now, the next question that you should ask as a first principle thinker is, why is it the fastest growing segment? To put it in perspective, education can only be solved in 2 fundamental pillars. The first pillar is access. The second pillar is infrastructure, right? Access is something that fundamentally, like IIM Lucknow is solving for you. None of you guys know me, Shravan, know me. Who is Shravan? I am currently a guy sitting in Jammu, coming from a very different background. Probably you know me from LinkedIn a little bit. But specifically, if this call, if this online platform would have not been there, you would have not been able to access this information about product management, right? So access is something that EdTech is solving, right? A teacher sitting in Kota can give a lecture to 10,000 students in Telangana. But on the contrary, if this technology would have not been there, it would have been very difficult for him to give a lecture to 10,000 or millions of students. And that is why companies like BYJU'S, Vedantu, and all of these companies are growing very rapidly. The second segment is infrastructure, which cannot be solved without the help of government, like government schools. In the last 40 years, how much improvement have you seen in government schools, right? Infra cannot be solved without the intervention of government. So EdTech as a segment is rapidly growing because it is solving the problem of access, and also by building digital products which have better layer of access, different modes of learning and stuff like that. So What I'm trying to put across to you is this segment is growing so rapidly that in the next 2 years, it will effectively triple. And it will grow to an expenditure of $400 billion, which is huge for a small segment which started like 7-8 years back or 10 years back. Yeah. So that's the first part. So from a first principle standpoint, the first point that you take away, whenever you try to solve a problem in product management, you first look at the size of the problem. How big is the problem? How many people it will impact? Going ahead. Yeah. Now, this is a very, very special segment where I currently work on, and the product that I lead is the supplementary education segment. What I mean by supplementary education segment is, since India doesn't have a very good infra about education, everybody wants to go to tuitions. Aapko bhi yaad hoga, going 10 years back, you used to go to 6th class to school, and then you used to go to tuitions, right? And the tuition teacher used to teach you all of those subjects and stuff like that, right? Because eventually India, China, Indonesia, and all of these countries are aspirational countries where education is specifically a mode to drive career outcomes. It's not like US, where skills are typically learned because they like those skills and your basic financial needs are taken care of, right? So in India, a parent, even if he's from a middle class background or a lower middle class background or a rich background, they would want to give the best supplementary education to their children so that they can effectively move to a career like IIT JEE, like NEET, become a lawyer, become a doctor, and do all of that stuff, because fundamentally when they believe that education is the way to shift their social strata, right? So this segment in itself in particular currently stands at an expenditure of $16 billion in India. And in the next 2 years, this is going to grow as big as $30 billion. So imagine a segment doubling in itself in 2 years, right? Which is huge, right? I have also put across a small graph to tell you how the expenditure of 16 billion is spread across. See, you see that in grade 9 to 12, this total graph adds up to 16. It's more like a matrix. If you add 0.48, 0.77, 1.28, and all of those things, it adds to 16 billion. Where you see the significant mass, you see it in middle income and aspirer segment, right? So what does that tell you? That supplementary education is something that even the mass segment of India is trying to invest in, because that is something that will bring value to their children, to their futures, to their outcomes, right? So it secondly proves the second hypothesis of product management, that it's a mass problem that they want to solve for, deriving from the first thought that I came towards to. So this is a very interesting segment where BYJU'S is trying to intervene, or any other startup is trying to intervene and trying to solve this problem. The demand is so high. The demand is so high that you guys also remember, if you were doing CAT coaching, you invested 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 bucks on that coaching, because you knew that if I move into an IIM, I might get it at a great job which would improve my social strata, right? So this is the segment that I'm going to talk about, the supplementary education segment. Yeah, I've also put a reference link over there. It's a great report by Omidyar Network. It's one of the best VCs who invest in this segment. You can go through the report. The link is there. I will share the PPT after the presentation. Yeah. Now, the interesting part about product management. Now you know that the problem is big. I have told about the size of the problem, but how do you build a product for that, right? That's a question. Now, whenever you try to build a product, what do you look in reference to as a first principle is, what is the current solution for that product? What is the current thing that is effectively solving that problem, right? The current solution is a typical tuition class, which is outside your house, right? What are the tenets of a typical tuition class? First part, जब भी आप tuition जाते थे, I'm sorry I slightly switched to Hindi in between because that's just the kind of person I am. But then again, I would try to keep it very, very informal, right? So the first part was, whenever you used to enter your class 10 minutes before the tuition class, it was like you meet your friends. There's a social engagement. What is the class about? Hey, dude, did you do your homework? Did you not do your homework? Okay, I want to sit near my friend. So the first aspect that happened in a typical tuition class was the social engagement. That's why one of the reasons you used to go to tuition is that I will meet my friends. That's the first part. The second part was the innovation that was brought across by your teacher. Like, you remember those classes in which a teacher would come, he would open a textbook and just read things for you. And you would say, kitna boring hai yaar, how boring is the class? But on the contrary, there is a teacher who comes, who brings a globe and shows, that this is Australia, this is America, this is other places, and you would really enjoy that experience. Oh wow, now I can look at these things, right? So two fundamental aspects happened. One, social engagement. Second, the pedagogy of education. Now these two are a fundamental lever to build a great tuition class, right? Now, as a product manager or as an entrepreneur, we wanted to derive these two factors into a digital product, which is very difficult to do, right? So I have just also put across some of the shortcomings in the current tuition structure, which the current digital product has to solve for. So this is again from that report. There were 5 fundamental levers. One, the first shortcoming, lack of personal attention. You would have remembered in your tuition classes, 60 students are there. The teacher will only focus on the 5 brilliant students. The rest students, बच्चे कर लो, कोई बात नहीं, tuition करके आ जाना, देख लेंगे अगली class में. The second thing was lack of quality. The tuition teacher, now India is not a tuition. India doesn't have that teaching infrastructure where you will find great quality teachers in biology, in SST, in social science, in other places, in history, right? You might find it for mathematics and computer science because it's relatively a high paying field. Teaching is not a profession in India which pays well, right? So lack of quality is there. Third was lack of international standards. Now, more often than not, whenever you do a degree in India, if you go to US, you typically see that they would say, do a degree again. We don't recognize that degree. So that's the lack of international standards. Fourth was the quality and the pedagogy of education. You remember your NCERT books. If you take 1995 NCERT books and current NCERT books, you would find like probably 10% difference there. There isn't much difference there. So poor quality content and syllabus was another reason, right? And the fifth was the major concern that you and me also, I faced in IIT. Probably, I am not sure. I have not been to an IIM, so I'm not sure how that happens in an IIM. But the teaching pedagogy, it's very stale. It's not what people like. It's not what students like. It looks like, okay, it's just rote consumption of information. So in order to build a product which is really engaging and in a digital sense, we had to look at all these tenets. How do you derive the first two parts, the social engagement and the pedagogy, and also solve for these shortcomings? What it tells you from a first principle thinking is that you looked at the user need. First, you looked at the market. Then you looked at what are the tenets of a typical existing product and what are the shortcomings in those products. And then what is the user need so that if those shortcomings are solved for, you build a better product. Clear till now, guys? Give me a thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up probably in the chat that if everything is going great till now. Where do I see the chat here? Okay, at least I saw some thumbs ups. Anyways, sure, got it. Yeah, I would keep it here only. Yes. Okay, cool. Now, I talked about few things to you, right? So we looked at the size of the market. We looked at what are the tenets of a typical tuition. Now we know what are the user needs that typically are going to be important for building a great product. What we want, number one, personalized attention, right? Second, conceptual clarity. Third, great content quality. Fourth, immediate doubt resolution. Fifth, engagement in class. Sixth, teaching pedagogy. Now, these are the 6 fundamental first principle levers that if I can build a digital product on these 6 levers and I do a great job, I am building a great digital solution. Everyone with me? Agreed? Yeah. Yeah. So what happened next? Now, nobody knows. So product management is, what is product management? I always keep speaking about this in multiple sessions wherever I talk. Is product management is all about solving non-deterministic problems into deterministic solutions. This world is not a game of chess where you know the outcome is fixed, right? So there are so many variables that even a product manager, when you're thinking of a feature, you're not aware of that what other factor might change so that the feature viability might change. So people started experimenting with models, like what model should work, what model would work for India, what model would be a scalable solution, right? So the first thing that people experimented with was, let's build a one-to-one model. Let's do one-to-one. A teacher is going to teach to a student, right? What were the pros of those models? The first model was, it was personalized attention. You're paying for it. The teacher is sitting in front of you and he's teaching you a certain subject. The second part was it has to be a quality teacher. That's why you're paying money for it. What were the cons of those models? In India, the teacher supply was limited. It's not scalable. Anything, when does a project move from a project to a product? Listen very clearly. When does a project move from a project to a product? It only happens when you build a solution at scale. A project at scale becomes a product, right? So that is the part. Now the two aspects which were there, which was teacher supply and internet bandwidth, it was not scalable, right? So people experimented with it, realized teacher supply is a big problem, internet bandwidth is a big problem, because still in India, 330 million people are on 2G. It's not possible to do that. So let's shut that model off. And the last part was that because it's so personalized, it's also not in the paying segment of people. It's not in the paying capacity of people. People have to pay more than the $1,000 a year, specifically on tuition classes, if you want a personal teacher. Remember those days when your father used to bring a personalized teacher, ki mere bachche ko maths nahi aata, let me call a personalized tutor who can teach maths to them. So that was the first model. Now came the second model. Ki let's do one to many. Let's do 1 to 25 or 1 to 30. Here also, what happened? The personalized attention slightly broke down, because now there are 25 students. A tutor has to give attention to 25 people, right? Like I have to give attention to around 30, 40 odd people, right? So I don't know effectively who are the people who are in the call, right? I knew a few people. I see Abhishek, I see Salona, I see probably Dhanushri and all of these people, right? So in that model, specifically the personalized attention got dissipated. Another pro was that it is still teacher-based learning, like a teacher like Shravan, who is good at product management or probably data science, is still teaching you. But then again, the con remained the same. If I can find a teacher for mathematics, I can find a teacher for product, I can find a teacher for computer science. How do I find a teacher for biology? How do I find a teacher for social science? So that also didn't happen, right? So this model also didn't work. So the third part, we moved to a 1 to mega model. Okay, let's do one person teaching to 500 students, right? In that part, what happened? It was scalable. Teacher supply was not a constraint, right? Internet bandwidth was also not a constraint, because at 500 students, you cannot stream, right? But what were the cons? No personalized attention, no engagement between teacher and student. वो भी काम नहीं किया. Third model also didn't work. Now the fourth model came. Fourth model is a recorded class with a live tutor support. Now it had major pros. Like, let's assume if Shravan is not in this session, he's not teaching you anything, and you're just looking at the PPT. 80% of the content you can derive from yourself. This is what it means. This is what it means. But with the presence of Shravan, not as a teacher, but as a tutor to solve your doubts, it typically helps you understand those concepts better, right? You could have very well read the slide and understood that these are the four models. But now I'm explaining this to you, so it gives you better clarity. So what happened? Content is the primary mode of learning, right? Second, there's instant doubt resolution because the tutor is present. Third, internet bandwidth is not an issue because my stream is visible and everything is the recorded content. And fourth, teacher supply is not an issue because it's not the teacher who's teaching. It's the tutor who is solving. Teaching is happening through the content. Now in product management per se, what does this mean? Product management is an iterative process, right? So I started with telling you about the market, telling you about the tenets, looking at the tenets, and from looking at the user needs, figuring out what solutions might work, what solutions might be the best solutions, right? So it's an iterative process. So 1-to-1 didn't work, 1-to-many didn't work, 1-to-mega didn't work, recorded class might work, might not work, but we are experimenting with it, right? Guys with me? Give me a heads up. Give me a yes. Cool. Understood. Now, I want to talk about something else also, right? So I wanted to talk about why specifically we are building a different product for K-12 and why can't it be something like Zoom only? Kya need hai bhai? Kyun karna hai? Why can't we use Zoom only? right? Why can't we use Google Meets only? What's the difference, right? Now, here the fundamental purpose that I want to talk about from a product management perspective is you look at certain levers which are catered to a target audience. Whenever you try to build a product, you try to understand the needs of the target persona. Post K-12 product, something like upgrade, right? Here, all of you guys, you are all smart people, educated people, you are in IIM, you want to build a career, so your attention span is automatically higher. You're listening to me, right? But with kids, it's not there. Kids would not do the same, right? The second thing, engagement is not a concern. Let's assume today I was not this interactive and I was just telling you great content. You would have still listened to me. That happens in a typical class for you. But does that happen with kids? If your sister who is in 5th class takes a tab and doesn't enjoy that process, what will happen? She'll leave the tab, right? As simple as that, right? Third is, there is focus on content and practical studies is paramount in the post K-12 ecosystem. So you would look at practical studies. What can I learn from this session and apply in my class, right? There, the focus, there the focus is more on content. Is it engaging? Not necessarily that outcomes are very, very important for them. For them, it is like, did I really enjoy the class? Did I really have fun in the class? For you, it's not necessarily about enjoyment in the class. If there's a great teacher who's teaching you great content, you would be very serious to attend that, right? And the fourth part is the outcome decides the success of the program. Let's assume post your IIM degree, you don't get a job in a desired MNC at a desired package. What will happen then? You would ideally say that your MBA helped you gain certain skills, but you will be very disheartened, to be very honest, right? Let's put it that way. But for them, the outcome is not that. In the K-12 ecosystem, the outcome is, for a 5th class student, the outcome is not to crack IIT JEE. He's not in 11th class. The outcome is, did he have fun? Will he move to the next 6th grade or not? So this, what I'm trying to put across from a product management and first principle structure is that even though the products might look the same, they might look the same from a UI perspective, but from a first principle perspective, the unarticulated and the articulated needs are very different for the user. So you have to fundamentally understand what is the user need of that segment. Again, starting from market, tenets, typical solutions, then understanding the target segment. Make sense? Yeah. So going ahead. Now, I want to talk about something interesting to you guys. So typically, all of you guys think that product management is something that if you do user research and do all of that stuff, you would be able to figure out what features work, right? And you would build the right features. Today, I'm going to give you a funda that product management is just not about finding the user need. It's also about understanding the user ecosystem, right? Let me put it this way. 3 years back, demonetization happened, right? Did Paytm figure that out? It didn't, right? But what happened for Paytm? Demonetization happened, and that was an external variable which changed everything for them, right? That's something that happened. On the contrary, the same thing happened with COVID. Before COVID, everybody thought that online is a segment of learning. It's a segment of learning, maybe 10%, maybe 20%, but major learning happens at 80%. In offline institutes, in engineering colleges, in schools, in premium institutes. With the advent of COVID, it brought a paradigm shift. It was a variable not in the hands of businesses. It was a variable that was not in hands of anyone, right? But what happened there? You had to migrate to online classes. Once you migrated to online classes, what happened? It branched like a tree. First, people thought, oh my God, this is going to be so bad. Engagement is going to be so small. What will I do about it? But what really happened is that you started understanding the positives of online learning, that there is gamified content, there is fun in the games. And so you started realizing the nuances of which seemed like a problem converted into an opportunity. And EdTech became a booming sector. So the next aspect of first principle of product management that I'm trying to put across is you also, whenever you try to build a product for a target persona, you also try to look at paradigm shifts in the ecosystem. Like, let me give you another very simple example. Today in India, I come to you and I say, I have a video learning app and I have an audio learning app, right? You as a VC want to invest $10 million in either of those apps, and both of the apps have similar retention. Where would you invest? The simple answer to this is you would invest in the video learning app. The reason for that is because India is India as a country has very, very short attention span. People love to watch videos and there is the barrier to entry is very small. Audio learning is typically for educated people in metro cities. So if you want scale, that is the reason you see ShareChat scaling and Google paying almost $1 billion for its acquisition, but you don't see any great probably audio platform getting a funding of $100 million. So you also have to look into the long-term vision where the LTV of the business itself makes sense or not. So this COVID brought a LTV to the EdTech ecosystem. Now people are not thinking that online learning is a segment. They are now saying that blended learning is a segment. And blended learning is going to be the wave of the future. So a paradigm shift, which was not in control of product managers. That is something interesting, right? So you see, I have just put across another small snippet there. The post-COVID spend on education, on EdTech has increased from 3.1% globally to 5.5%, which is effectively, do you realize the gravity of that? That it's effectively double in 2 years, right? So that is something that I wanted to put across. Now, the interesting part of it. Let's do a case study. You IIM guys, I know you do a lot of case studies. Let's do a case study. Yeah. So what we wanted to do was, I'm just taking a very small feature. Let's design a small pre-class experience for 4th to 9th grade students. Now, first of all, what is a pre-class experience? A pre-class experience in an online platform or in an offline platform means whenever your class is starting at 5 o'clock, you come to class at 4:45 or 4:50, right? Now, what do you want to do? What do you typically do? You typically discuss your old case studies. You sit with your friends, you do chit chat, you discuss some random topics, or you try to make some social relationships. You discuss with your toppers, what are they doing, or what did you do last night? So a tip, how you make that 10 minutes is the engagement part before the class starts, right? Now replicating that, the same problem in an online setup. How difficult is that, right? I joined the Zoom session. You are attentive people. That's why you were waiting, right? But on the contrary, if this would have been a session of kids, do you think they would have stayed? They would have left. They would have left, right? So for why? Because why do we want to build this? Because students have articulated needs. I want to talk to my other friends. I am going to tuition class. A 6th class student would say, I'm going to tuition class because my friends are there. Not necessarily, oh my God, my teacher teaches so well, right? And there are also like, I had fun. We might go to outside the tuition class. We will talk about what are we going to do at night. And there are a lot of articulated and unarticulated needs. So you have to create an engaging structure where in those 10 minutes, those students of 4th to 9th grade don't lose interest till the tutor joins the class, right? So that is something that you had to build. Now, how? From a solution standpoint, if we think first principally, there were 3 fundamental points which we wanted to consider. The first point was like how students enter a class very seamlessly. Like if your tuition class is closed, right? How can you enter the class? You would not be able to. Similarly, in an online platform, they should be seamlessly be able to enter the classroom, right? So that means what do they want? They would ideally want a waiting room. They would want a proper internet. They would want a device performance, right? That is something that is there, right? The second thing is they would want to exchange greetings, like notes in a typical tuition class. They would be able to introduce themselves. Like you typically go into class, you say, hey man, how are you? How are you doing? Hey man, what were you doing? Some sort of typical greetings and notes, like what happened in the previous class, what are we going to get taught about? That is the second thing. The third thing that you would be able to see is, like in a typical tuition classes, what am I going to get taught today? What is the tutor going to teach me today, right? So these are 3 fundamental articulated needs. I should be able to enter the class very seamlessly. Second, I should be able to create social relationships. Second, third, I should be able to know what is going to get taught today, what I had to do last class, and what my teacher is going to typically, what requisite material I had to cover. Three things, very simply, from a product management perspective, understood the needs for a pre-class experience. Now, based on this research, we came up with some solutions, right? The concept of a waiting room, you have to build a waiting room, right? The waiting room had 7 things, right? Join the class seamlessly, which I talked about, introduce themselves, know other students in the class, know the tutor, know about the concepts to be taught, create local groups of friends. Typically in a class, you sit with your friends, right? You sit with your friends. That's create local subgroups. Last, tell the tutor of the previous concepts and the status of revision, right? Now, the next step, which really became important, is that the experience doesn't have to be so cognitively heavy that it becomes difficult to consume for 6 to 15-year-old kids. That is also something that we had to take care of, right? From a product management perspective, very small nuances, but very important nuances, right? What is the next job of a PM? In an MVP, there is a concept called minimum viable product. What do you mean by a minimum viable product? Is typically that if a product which is with minimum effort serves 80% of the user need, let's put that out in the market, get the feedback, and then try to improve it iteratively, right? Now, that is something that we wanted to put across, because if as an entrepreneur or as a business, if we invest enough amount of money on an MVP, which we are not 100% sure of would work or would not work, because it's a non-deterministic problem. I've already told you about. This is something that we figured out from our user research, right? So you typically try to prioritize the best possible features, which make more sense. The first feature was, yaar, class to karni hai, so they have to join seamlessly. That's important. Second, they have to introduce themselves for personalized attention. That's the second tenet. Third, they should be able to interact among themselves. That is social engagement. Fourth, they should know who the tutor is. Fifth, what is going to be taught in the class. Now, if these 5 things are taken care of, I am 80% okay. Okay, I know that you knew today that Shravan is going to talk about EdTech and the future of learning. You knew he was the lead product manager. You knew that this will be the demographics, and you were in the session, right? The next 2 things, creating local subgroups or channels, might be relevant, might not be relevant, right? It might happen, you might do it the right way, you might not do it the right way, right? But I would say there is a company in China called Timing 360 who does exactly the same thing. They create local subgroups. But then again, from an MVP standpoint, from our standpoint, this is what we thought about from a product thinking, first principle thinking, that these are the 5 things that we should necessarily solve. Now, this is the first design draft, right? What are you seeing here? See very quickly. Welcome, Akash. First, personalized attention. That's the first part. Second, you see images of those students who are there in the class, right? So you know, if you hover over any image, you know there is Bharti, there is Vandana, there is Akash, there is some other person. So you know who are the students in the class. Because in a tuition class, what happens? You don't change the batch. Every day, aisa thodi hota hai ki students change. It is the same batch that continues, right? So you know all of these students. You know one more thing, there's only 10 minutes left in the session, right? That is something that is critical information that the tutor is going to join. You know who is the tutor, right? You also know what's going to be taught, and you're also getting a chance for seamless connectivity to check your audio and video settings. That's the first design draft. What did this ensure for first principle standpoint? This ensures who are the students. This ensures who is the tutor, what is going to be taught. This ensured when the class will start. This ensured that we can say hi to other students in the class. This ensured that there is a personalized message for them before joining the class, like attendance in the class. There was a GIF that I wanted to share across with you guys. What we also built was, like, if you click on any image, it sends a hi to that person. That is something that we tried to do from an engagement standpoint. Yeah. The next thing that we did was, after the 10 minutes, we moved to a Meets-like experience, where we wanted to check the audio and video settings by default. Because why did we choose a Meets-like experience? There has to be a logic to that. Because this is something that students are already familiar with. So audio and video settings were tested for. They also saw all their friends have already joined the class, and now they have to join the class. What really happened through this is that the fundamental disconnect in device settings or internet settings is taken care of. It also created an urgency, like all my friends are in the class, I should also join the class, right? Third thing was, this is a very similar experience to meets, so it's not something of a learning curve that you have to look at. The fourth part was that in the help section, there was a technical security that agar kuch fat jayega, if there is something wrong, there's instant customer support. And there was a help section. So we typically try to solve it, right? So this was the second transition that happened. So this is how we fundamentally evolved into a pre-class experience. How did the transition happen? First, the screen came where all the students were visible. We showed them the time, we showed them the details, we showed them all of those tenets. Then eventually we told them that if you have some technical issues, we are solving that. Coming from the core tenets, which were there in the pre-class experience, that they should be engaged, they should be interactive, they should know what is going to be taught. And this is how you designed just a feature of an entire product for an entire set of target segment. So what would I say again? For a pre-class experience, what were the 4 tenets? Social interactions, ease of joining, interaction among students, preparedness for class. Again, product building for kids or any target persona is an iterative structure till you get feedback and arrive at product market fit. And the last thing before I close the session and then open to questions, I would say the 3 core tenets that I keep talking about that you have to think before you move to any framework in product management is, if you want to build a great product, think of 3 parts. 1, simplicity of use. If the product is not simple to use, it's not usable at all. If ClearTrip would have taken you 20 minutes to book a flight, you would have never used ClearTrip. If Uber takes you 30 minutes to book a ride, you switch to Ola, right? If Swiggy doesn't give you the right restaurant, you switch to Zomato, right? This is how fickle our instant gratification, user gratification is. So simplicity of use is very important. Second, joy of usage. If the app is buggy, if the experience is buggy, would you use it? Why do you use Apple? Whenever you use an Apple laptop, why don't you switch to Android? How many people have you seen moving from an Apple to an Android? But on the contrary, Android to Apple happens every day, right? So the joy of usage is very important. So not only the outcome is important, but the joy of usage is also important, that I should enjoy using the product, right? The third is there has to be core user value. And what I mean by core user value is, from the existing solution, you always think of value from a benchmark. I cannot say it hawa mein ki isme to value hai. If the current benchmark, like let me give you another very small example of IRCTC. 10 years back, we wanted to do a train ticket. What did you used to do? You would wake up 4 in the morning, go Tatkal ki line mein lagoge. By the time you reach there, the ticket is gone and you are in waiting, right? Somebody thought of, let's create a website and put that experience in 15 minutes. And today, how many people do go to the train station actually book a ticket there? Majority of the people use IRCTC. So it is a 10x better experience, even though IRCTC is not the best UX, but from the previous experience, it's 10x better, right? So that is the core user value. So these 3 core tenets typically build a great product. So I started the session by telling you, when you think from first principles, you think of the market. The second thing that you do is the size of the problem. Third thing that you look at is typically the tenets in the current solution and the shortcomings in the current solution. The fourth thing that you look at is iterative models which can work. Fifth thing that you typically look at is that in that model, there can be paradigm shifts which you have to take into account, something like COVID, something like that. So you have to be fundamentally aware how the user ecosystem is growing. And the sixth part that you have to typically take into account is define very clearly what your target segment wants, very, very clearly. Like, you might feel that it's the same product, but it is very different. Like, Zoom is not an education product. I'm being very clear about that. Then define what their needs are, prioritize those needs in the aspects of the 3 core tenets: simplicity of use, joy of usage, core user value. And that is where the entire product management or any problem solving process kind of ends. Thank you very much, guys, for listening to me so patiently. This is where I end the session. And now I open to questions to all of you. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Shravan. That was a very enlightening primer into thinking about first principles of product management. We do have a few questions, so I'll just, if anybody has a question, they can just unmute themselves and ask. Um,
Uh, Hi, Shravan. Am I audible?
Yes, you are pretty much. May I know your name?
Yeah, hi. This is Karthik from IIM Calcutta.
Hey,
Uh,
Karthik. Hi.
Thank you for a wonderful talk. It was really enlightening. So my question revolves around the last part of the presentation, which is the simplicity of use. So
Yep.
how do you balance that versus a product which might have a steep learning curve?
Mhm.
And the question comes from my experience of using AirMeet.
Mhm.
So for me personally, it was not a very simple video conferencing platform to use. So there, I feel that simplicity of use as a core tenant is missing. So do
Mhm.
you think that the product is weak in that sense, or the PM of AirMeet would be thinking something differently?
See, what you have to define as simplicity doesn't necessarily mean a simple UI. First, you have to really understand what I mean by simplicity. Simplicity can even mean that if you have to buy a car, it is a decision of it's not a decision of 15 minutes, right? It's a decision that takes you 20 days, right? Simplicity of usage basically means you arrive at that user value very, very quickly. Now it might have a complicated UI, but if it gives you enough information, like, have you seen the interface of WebMD? Have you heard of WebMD, Karthik?
I've heard of it, but I haven't.
Yes. So WebMD is a medical website, right? It's full of content, but it is supposed to be full of content. Because if in a medical setup, if you get a wrong kind of information, it might lead to necessary problems in your health, right? Simplicity by design means that how quickly can you move to the fundamental user value. If I have not used AirMeet, if you were not able to, if the core tenet of AirMeet is to do video conferencing and it took you a steep learning curve to figure out how to do video conferencing, then definitely simplicity is not their tenet and they are not working on it, or they have not worked on it, or they're trying to improve around it. Simplicity doesn't mean good UI. It doesn't mean good UX. Simplicity basically means it might have a cumbersome UI, but that cumbersome UI can be very, very like compulsory, or they would have put it by design in that sense, so that you are fundamentally aware of that information. It's like balancing the information versus the UI paradox. Like if you don't have enough information, you cannot buy a car. If you have if you have a very simple UI where there is not enough information, then also you would not be able to make a decision. So I am not necessarily sure what AirMeet has done, but answering your fundamental question from a first principle standpoint, it means you design it in such a way that the user is able to discover the right value in the first 30, 40, or 50 seconds of using the product, because the user is not your circle of influence. That it is as simple as that. Another example that I would tell you is, which is very simple to put across to you, is why do you see that airline websites have the same UI? Every airline website has from to, right? So they have figured that out, that this is the best possible user experience from a paradigm level that would work for the simplicity of usage. It's as simple as that. That's the reason any airline website, Cleartrip, Make My Trip, Ixigo, the first screen is where do you want to start from, where do you want to end to. That's it. I hope I answered the question. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And just one more question. This revolves around the prioritization that you showed in the case study. So in
Sure.
the real world, do you actually go by framework which we guys study for the job preparation, or is it something else that you use in the world? Like,
Understood. See, the point that I'm trying to put across is, think of any framework, like, let me put it this way. Think of any framework is as a process to speeden, right? Not to necessarily give you the insight to understand what is important, right? Insight always comes from two aspects. One, that if it's a 0 to 1 kind of a thing, then it has to come from qualitative research. What I mean by qualitative research is you try to identify, hypothesize the right target segment and try to understand where is the biggest overlap of the need and try to understand that. Now, a framework might help you that if you get like 30 odd ideas, that these 30 odd ideas are all important to them. A framework might help you very quickly isolate, okay, these 16 ideas might add only 30% value. That is something there. But if you even don't know a framework and you just do a mood board testing, bring the right people across, do a survey, and you just sort them out in the most common word maps, you would find out the best possible feature that you have to put across. And there are multiple other ways you can prioritize stuff also, right? It can also be a banking hypothesis of a competitor. It can be something that has already worked. So necessarily, it's not always a framework. Frameworks help. I would not say they don't, but I am not a fan of frameworks because they also limit your thinking in a particular direction. As a PM, you have to be curious enough to understand that there can be a variable which is outside the framework, which the framework is not discussing about. So what I typically do, if you ask me what I do qualitative research, understand what are the needs. From those needs, try to identify data points. Are they available in the market? If they're not available in the market, then I typically move to a framework that if it does it fit in a framework or not. If it fits in a framework, then I typically make a choice around it. But then again, 7 out of 10 times I may be right, 3 times I am also wrong.
Understood. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
There's another question on chat by Ashok. How does data science and product management converge? I see new roles such as ML, AI, product manager. How is it different from the traditional PM?
See, product management as a fundamental principle is it's not a job, it's a skill, right? It's a skill of problem solving, right? Now, AI or ML, or for that matter, any other skill set, consumer product management, technical product management, B2B product management, fundamentally, you're trying to solve that there is a user problem. How do I solve it at scale? It's as simple as that. Now, AI product management typically solves is in solutions where people are trying to find either information faster or trying to get solutions which are typically better, accurate solutions. Like in healthcare, AI product management is very, very relevant because a doctor there might be a possibility that 3 out of 100 times that he might diagnose that somebody doesn't have cancer or has cancer, right? But if an AI model is built in such a way, the accuracy can be more than 99%. So there isn't any difference from a first principle thinking standpoint, but the only difference is that whenever you move into a vertical, like if you are in fintech, then it's very, very relevant to have information about fintech products to identify the user need. Eventually, as a PM, you have to understand the user need. So tomorrow, if you are the PM for Google search and you don't know ML, you're never going to be able to find which fundamental variable typically affects search. So you have to come from an AI background. But at the core, why do you need to have an AI background? It is to fundamentally understand the user need only. So from a first principle standpoint, there is no change. It is like a typical traditional PM, but industry to industry, your skills, your product management skill set has to complement the industry's need. In enterprise B2B, if you join a company like Intercom, right, you need to know tech. You cannot build a product like Intercom if you don't know tech. But on the contrary, if you join a company like Swiggy, doesn't really matter. You can be a consumer PM, right? But so think of it like this. The base layer of PM is problem solving, first principle thinking. Above that is something that is an industry specific need, which you can earn through certifications and do stuff like that. So yeah, answering your question, it is just vertical specific, but from a typical thought process level, it's not different. It's not different at all. Yeah.
I hope that answered your question, Ashok. The next question is from Milan. How do you build in joy of usage in EdTech, given that studying is considered a chore by children?
It's a very interesting question, actually. So what we typically try to do is we try to build layers on top of the typical tuition learning structures. What I mean by layers is like you try to build a layer of gamification, like you try to build a layer of interactiveness, like you typically try to do something like. So what I'm trying to put across is that there are fundamental nuances which a student enjoys. Like if you tell a student to add 2 plus 2 in a gamified manner, he would ideally learn it. Why do you think students on small children go to YouTube channels and learn from there? Because they have the fun of usage over there. So in the products, in the tuition products that we build stuff like gamified stuff, different games, very interesting avatarish UI, and we do a bunch of stuff around understanding their unarticulated needs, doing interactive stuff that you can click on a particular screen and it opens up a different dialog box for you. We do a varied of internet stuff. We bunch of product management exercises, bunch of gamified exercises to build the performance layer for a student to enjoy. Eventually, the goal is the student should feel that it's like a game, that he's playing a game. And the best product, if you really want to look at it, is from my side, which I really like, is Duolingo. Use Duolingo, you'll fall in love with it. You will just enjoy the process, how they have used the UI, how they have used imagery, how they have used the affirmations. We also put a lot of affirmations also into the product. What I mean by affirmations is, if you do a question right, oh wow, you solved it right. You solved it right. So there is no simple way, but there are multitude array of products. So I told you, it's gamified layers, it's then affirmations, it's use of imagery, it's interactive video layers, it's bunch of other stuff that we typically do on top of the basic learning pedagogy. It's interactive whiteboards, like a teacher can teach from their side and you can also teach from your side. So all of those things can happen. All of those things can happen, and this can only happen in a digital format. And this is where the EdTech edge is. This cannot happen in an offline format. This can happen in an online format. So yeah, answering the question. Yeah. So there's no simple way. We do a bunch of stuff around it. Yeah.
Right. Thanks a lot for that answer. Is there any other question? You can unmute yourself and ask. Okay, I have a question. So there's a lot of problem of attrition in EdTech on platforms like Udemy and Coursera. People sign up but don't actually end up completing the course. So what do you think can be the solution for that? Or why do you think that that's such a huge problem that's plaguing a lot of EdTech platforms?
So I think completion rates is something that is entirely dependent on the intent of the person, right? See, the fundamental premise here is, I told you that India is an aspirational country. Till the point, there are why do you see that completion rates for IIT, JEE and NEET are very high? Because they think that they will aspirationally change the behavior of the person, and the person would eventually evolve to a stage where it is effectively going to give them a higher strata of success, any degree of success, right? But in terms of other things like photography, like arts, I am so sad that arts is such a great way to learn about life, and history is such a great way of learn. Literature is such a great way of life. But fundamentally, what happens is that people have not given due importance to it. The reason for that is, from a mindset perspective, these things don't add value in the job seeking market. That is currently how the ecosystem is structured, which is very sad. But if you go to US, if you go to countries like Europe, you would see that people doing a multitude of degrees. They're doing degrees in psychology, they're doing degrees in literature, they're doing degrees in English learning, they're doing all of that stuff. And that is the reason, because they fundamentally know that their livelihood is taken care of. I am talking at a very philosophical level, right? Fundamentally, what a person wants, that their livelihood is first taken care of, and then they move towards the passion economy. India is also moving towards the passion economy. And till the time, in the next 10 years, as India evolves as a more industrialized, as a modern nation, eventually we would see this transition slowly happening. But definitely in the next 10-15 years, you would see that these courses would also have high completion rates, because people will realize the value of these courses. Currently, these courses are more like hobbies, like going to Udemy, doing a hobbyist course, like theek hai, kar liya, acha hai. But eventually, when they see that there is a value, there's a career they can build out of there, then you would see high completion rate. This is the philosophical reason. The other reason for that is, content consumption by itself also demands a lot of attention and a lot of prerogative from the student, from itself only, right? But what happens more often than not, when you pay $500 for it, you are not dedicated enough. $500 is not a big amount which changes anything for you, so you see, मैं कल कर लूंगा, परसों कर लूंगा, and then you forget about it. But on the contrary, like if you go to IIM, right, or you go to or you join a course for 1 lakh or 2 lakh rupees, right, you're also fundamentally pushed from your own end that I've invested significant amount of money. That's the second reason. So that's the reason you see live platforms are typically more expensive. And the third and the last reason that I again want to decipher a lot is that people don't think of their lives as they have to become intellectually better thinkers. They think that skills are a way or a means only to get financial independence or a sort of stereotypical independence. But the core aim of gaining skills is to gain more perspectives and become a better problem solver. That is the reason you would see that in a typical job seeking structure, people think more experience means he's a better person at that job. But you see people at 27 building billion-dollar companies, right? Building billion-dollar companies. How does that happen? So it is the curiosity that is really important. So the three aspects. One, people think that there are only certain streams in India which are specific to building their career. Very sad about it. I have been a person who loved arts from the very beginning, but never could pursue it. That's a separate thing. The second thing is that because ticket size of these courses are small, the investment is very bad. The time you would want to invest is, it's okay, doesn't matter. And the third thing that I wanted to talk about is that specifically curiosity is something that is missing in people. Curiosity typically gives you the ability to build innovative solutions, but if we follow stereotypes, it is typically going to not help you in the long run, and it is going to keep you in the rut. To be out of the rut, you have to make noise. That is the thing. Yeah.
That's very true. Thanks a lot for that answer. And if there are any more questions, we can have them. I guess not. So thanks a lot, Shravan, for this wonderful session on understanding how to design a product, the whole process that you talked about, right from understanding the market, gauging the size of the problem, understanding the drawbacks of current solutions, the needs of the target segment, and finally going on about building the product. That was very useful. And the case study in specific was quite helpful to understand the applicability of this whole process.
Yes.
And I really liked what you said about curiosity at the end. So thanks a lot for this talk. And
I would just give me a second, guys. I would give you, in order to, if you want to connect with me, I am very easily accessible on LinkedIn. So I would just give me my LinkedIn profile. If you want to connect with me, guys, feel free to do that. And I would try to help as many people as I can.